Hi, everybody. Today is Tuesday, May 6th, 2025, and our friends Colin Wilkerson and Andrei Martyanov are back with us. Welcome back.
Pleasure to be with you guys.
Let's. I want to focus on the case of the conflict in Ukraine, but before going there is a video of Donald Trump talking about Yemen. I cannot resist to show that to you. Here is what he said, Colonel.
Some very good news last night. The Houthis have announced that they are not, or they've announced to us at least, that they don't want to fight anymore. They just don't want to fight. And we will honor that. And we will stop the bombings. And they have capitulated. But more importantly, we will take their word. They say they will not be blowing up ships anymore. And that's what the purpose of what we were doing. So that's just news. We just found out about that. So I think that's very, very positive. They were knocking out a lot of ships going, as you know, sailing beautifully down the various seas. It wasn't just the canal. It was a lot of other places. And I will accept their word, and we are going to stop the bombing of the Houthis. Effective immediately, and Marco, you'll let everybody know that.
Colonel, do you understand what has happened?
I have no idea. I know it's not a canal. It's the Red Sea, SEA. It's not a canal. And I do know that the Houthis were having Al Ansar were having a considerable impact on particularly insurance companies who wouldn't insure commercial ships. So all you had going through really was what I would call rogue shippers who ship without any prospect of insurance, but hope that they get their cargo through and they'll be able to pay. And there were, I understood there maybe 50 a week or so of vessels like that were making it through, but no commercial shippers were making it through. And one of the reasons they were not, and they decided to go around the Cape, was because the offset costs for insurance were actually more than the cost for going the additional miles at sea. So the Houthis had accomplished their purpose, which was, as they expressed specifically, to stop commerce that could in any way, fashion, or form, or from states that were aiding and abetting Israel in its genocide in Gaza. Incidentally, a concept, generally speaking, humanitarian-wise, I fully support. And that's a hell of a thing for me to be saying as a 31-year military professional veteran of the U.S. military. But, and I don't think this is what they're saying it is. I just don't think it is. Israel just pounded the crap out of them. The only thing Israel can do with its, what I call Air Force full of cowards, is drop bombs on innocent civilians or on civilians, period. That's all they know how to do. If they got engaged in a real war where somebody shot back, I have a feeling they'd turn tail and run, as they apparently did when they were attacking Iran earlier and found out that Iran had air defenses and ability to paint them they didn't know they had. So this is not an Air Force of brave people. It's an Air Force of cowards who bomb civilians all the time. And I don't think that did it either. So I don't know where they're getting this message from other than they manufactured it. And I wouldn't put that past Rubio and Trump in combination or just Trump alone, that they manufactured it.
Yeah. Andrei, here is what Ansarullah said. Operations in the Red Sea will not stop until Israel stops aggression in the Gaza Strip. How so? How we can put these two statements?
You can't. It's the same as it's a smaller scale situation which is happening now with Ukraine. They also manufacture those numbers, as Colonel correctly stated. They just manufacture things, and this is Trump, and considering his character and his features, not bugs, which pursue him. And of course, he's a narcissist. We know he's a narcissist. And as any sociopath, he doesn't understand why things don't go his way. So what he does, being the guy who essentially he's still the showman and the guy who is the real estate shyster from New York. He always was like that for all his rhetoric and grandiose statements. And here we are. Obviously, Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, had no comments. You just presented us with the Houthis statement. But yeah, he may even believe what he's saying. You know, he needs some kind of success. He failed miserably with Ukraine because Russia didn't give an inch, despite all attempts and niceties from Witkov. And so now you have this thing. He needs some kind of the tangible to show to the world that he matters, you know, that he's great dude. But yeah, we are what, 4th month since a 24-hour peace in Ukraine. He continues to supply Ukraine whatever is left of it, you know, with arms and intel. And same goes here. He needs to perform, or he needs to present some kind of the facade of the successful guy, you know, to say that. And yeah, I mean, ship beautifully. I mean, he's, listen, I'm Russian, okay? My vernacular evidently is richer than his, okay? Because obviously beautiful and wonderful are the only adjectives he has command of, okay? And so whenever something happens, like, oh, they ship beautifully, there are 50,000 beautiful lives a day, I mean, come on, I mean, this is ridiculous, really. At least he looks like more coherent version of Biden, but still we have the, I'm really waiting for the moment when you can say, oh, okay, we at least got the guy in the White House who has a like mental capacity and understand basic facts on the ground.
Nima, I would just add in what Andrei just said, kind of keyed this to me, the insanity of Trump, you might call it. But I think in his warped mind, maybe Bibi has taken over the mission for him. And Bibi's motivation is a hypersonic missile that impacted Ben Gurion and stranded Jews all over the world because major airlines are not going to take them home. And so Bibi's taken over that part of the ball game. So Trump says, over to you, Bibi. I'm not attacking them anymore because it's costing me billions of dollars and I'm achieving nothing.
We had, Andrei, we had the interview with Donald Trump on MSNBC.
Oh, yeah.
And here is a part of that interview just to show how he understands the conflict in Ukraine. Here is what he said.
Deal with Ukraine. It's a sign, it seems, that the United States is invested in Ukraine's future. The Secretary of State told me this is a very critical week. Are you any closer to reaching a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia?
I hope so.
How would you characterize
I do believe we're closer with one party and maybe not as close with the other, but we'll have to see. I'd like to not say which one we're closer to, but we did do a deal for the American people that was good. We were able to get rare earth. You know, the Europeans are getting paid back. They have a loan. We didn't. Biden just gave him $350 billion. He has no idea where the money is, what happened. And at least we'll, in one form or another, get our, I don't feel so foolish. And remember this is Biden's war. This was a war that was never going to happen if I were president. This is a horrible, horrible war. And I get to see shots of soldiers through, satellite that are just so terrible. 5,000 soldiers are being, look, 5,000 soldiers a week on average are dying. They're not American soldiers, but I want to solve the problem. They're Russian soldiers and they're Ukrainian soldiers. And if I can save 5,000 souls, I just love doing it.
How long do you give both countries before you're going to walk away?
Well, there'll be a time when I will say, okay, keep going, keep being stupid.
When does that come? Are you close to it?
Sometimes I get close to it and then positive things happen, okay?
What's the red line for you? At what point do you say, that's it, we're walking away?
Well, you'll know. I mean, there'll be a time when I may say that. And if I do, there may be something I can't, maybe it's not possible to do. There's tremendous hatred, just so you understand. Kristen, we're talking tremendous hatred between these two men and between, some of the soldiers, frankly.
Andrei, what's so much That's what's so amazing to me is the way that he's picturing the situation in Ukraine, diminishing the picture to the hatred between soldiers, the hatred between the two leaders. It's what? How is it going to be perceived by Russians, in your opinion?
Well, it has been perceived properly, as I stated already. Witkov, he tried all he could. Granted, he is primarily a messenger, but the message is the same. Root causes, you don't address root causes. Special military operation continues, and Russia can do it for for many years. It's all going to be, and we spoke about it. I speak about this openly, and as horrible as it sounds, it is about the obliteration of the remaining sperm bank of what is the Ukraine today. This is what is this all about? You kill the enemy. But evidently, nobody in Washington, at least those who at the levers of power, maybe Tulsi Gabbard gets it, but they do not understand the nature of this conflict. Or they pretend not to understand, because in the end, it is about NATO expansion, it is about the security of Russia, and Russians are not going to compromise anymore. Simple as that. And believe me, Moscow knows about Washington several orders of magnitude more than Washington knows about Moscow. And that's what it is. He simply invents conflict, which is in some alternative universe. Reality is he tried for the last, 104 or 100 whatever days. He tried to portray the United States as the honest broker. United States is not a broker. It's a party to the war. United States is the main driver behind this whole, catastrophe for the combined West. And now he doesn't even get the proper numbers to start with. You can't get proper numbers when you have people like Kellogg or people of this nature. But that's what we have.
Colonel, this oversimplification of the conflict in Ukraine in the mind of Donald Trump, in your opinion, is that problematic to see the president of the United States talking the way that it seems that he doesn't understand the basics of the conflict in Ukraine?
Problematic is not a fit adjective. It's worse, far worse. It's insanity. And it's not even, in my view, anymore, and I harbored this view for some time about some of these key issues, oddly enough, not about Ukraine, but about others like Gaza and Yemen and the Levant, Southwest Asia, Iran, and so forth, staged for purposes, either political or security-wise, or both, purposes that we just didn't glean. I no longer believe that. I think the man's categorically insane. Let's just parse some of the things he said there. How can he even speak to his MAGA faithful about how in his first presidency, he didn't abet and aid this conflict, get it going in its full proportion so that when it comes to the special military operation, people like me, military professionals, are not surprised at all. How did it get to that point that he could deny that in statement after statement? And look at that CNN sycophantic reporter who didn't. She had follow-up. She had follow-up capacity. She demonstrated it. Her follow-ups were such softballs that all he had to do was keep lying. She should have looked at him and said, Mr. President, you keep saying this is Biden's war. You were president for 4 years during the maximum buildup of U.S. help for Ukraine to cause Putin to have to launch the special military operation. What do you say to that? Well, he probably would have shut her down right there. That would have been better than going on with the lies like CNN normally does. But I can't figure this president out anymore, Nima, except to say he's insane. Categorically, fundamentally, sociopathetically, whatever that word is. Insane.
Yeah. But there are people, Andrei, when you look at the interview where the lady that is asking the question to Donald Trump, she's desperate to see the United States getting out of the conflict in Ukraine, just leaving the conflict, being the continuation of the conflict. When you're going to leave Ukraine? What is that red line for you? And Donald Trump doesn't offer anything.
He is capable of saying a lot of things without saying anything. It's just absolute, it's the platitudes in the most extreme, so to speak. And I totally agree with Colonel. The build up and actually bringing up the armed forces of Ukraine to NATO, quote unquote, standards. By the way, Mr. Syrski was responsible for that, starting from 2014, no less, by the way, even before Trump administration. So it was on his watch. Javelin started to arrive there, all kinds of ammo, HIMARS, all kinds of things were started to be delivered there, including through obviously gathering and scraping the bottom of the barrel from the old Soviet equipment in the new NATO members, such as Poland, Slovakia, Czech Republic, what have you. So, and I agree with Colonel entirely. The guy is just, I mean, he doesn't want to answer anything. He just created this, imaginary world which has no relations on the with the realities, operational and strategic realities on the ground. And this, it's actually MSNBC, I believe. I read the transcript. He contradicts himself on every. He talks about that Russia now wants the whole of Ukraine. Actually, the special military operation is not about capturing Ukraine. The strategic aims, objectives are very clear there. In fact, he doesn't even understand that the Russians do not want to have the other 15 million people who will be freeloaders, and majority of them will be hostile and brainwashed towards Russia. But what can I say? Now he says about some other things, and yeah, I mean, it's either beautiful and wonderful or horrible. That's pretty much his adjectives vernacular. So, and I agree with Colonel. It's downright scary, insane, absolutely insane.
His favorite adjective, Nima, is beautiful, and he can use beautiful all over the map. He would go to Gaza, look at the mess there, and say, "Isn't this beautiful?"
Yeah, that's pretty much what he does, essentially. Well, the guy wanted to build their whatever casino and Riviera. So, I mean, can you believe it? To build something on the mass grave? I mean, and I'm not talking about mass graves as, what Indians, the Native Americans, which happened, but, have been rectified for so many years. No, we're literally we saw the genocide there, okay? And the guy has enough audacity to come there and say, oh, yeah, we're going to build here a wonderful resort with casinos and all that. I mean, it's beyond comprehension.
I don't know if you've seen that picture. I was hoping you'd put it up, maybe. The picture is one that starts off a new documentary made by Israelis about the horrible situation in Gaza. And it's the Israeli tanks lined up, apparently, for this new sustained military presence in Gaza, as Netanyahu and the Knesset call it. And it's 100 feet high of rubble. For as far as you can see, nothing but rubble. That's what they've done to Gaza, and now they're going in for an SMP. You know what's going to happen to them when they go in for an SMP? The same thing that happened in 2005 that caused Ariel Sharon, then prime minister, to withdraw the IDF entirely from Gaza because he was taking significant casualties. He shut down the 21 settlements, and he took every single IDF member out because they were getting destroyed by an insurgency. Guess what's going to happen to this same sustained military presence? Every Arab in the region is going to flock to the ranks of Hamas. Hamas has already got 40,000 ready to go. And this terrain now that you saw in that photograph, this terrain is now absolutely perfect for urban guerrillas because all it is rubble. So the IDF is going to be in an insurgency the moment it sets foot in Gaza if they are stupid enough to do so. And that insurgency is going to bring down the state of Israel.
When this video started, the lady asked Donald Trump about the deal he did with Ukraine. And he said, I got my piece of deal. And the deal is because Europe has the frozen Russian assets, we have the deal with Zelensky. It seems, Andrei, to me, the way that he's talking about the conflict, this is all he wanted to do with Ukraine. Do you feel that he wants to just let the conflict going on and just leaving Ukraine saying that it was their fault, I couldn't reach any sort of deal because of that?
It is his war now. It's essentially was from the get-go, but he had the chance to turn it around. He didn't. So it's, fait accompli now. Doesn't matter. It's his war. How he's going to handle it doesn't matter for Russians. It just simply doesn't. I mean, he may try to send, which, by the way, they don't want to, send more Abrams. There are a bunch of Russian guys, especially the crews of the Kornet and the UAVs, and Krasnopol shooting self-propelled guns. They have mortgages to pay. In Moscow, especially. Hey, you know what? Send in Mirages, send in F-16s. They do not do that well. I mean, so send more Abrams, send more Leopards. These are good money for those guys to pay off their, good apartments and condos in Moscow and the area. This is simple as that. It doesn't matter what NATO will do militarily now. The correlation of forces and means, of which I was warning since hell knows well, it shifted so dramatically in Russia's favor that it is now we are officially can say that, especially after Houthis broke through again through this wanted Israeli air defense, which is it's Israeli air and anti-missile defense is essentially Boeing and Raytheon. It is just that they allowed Israelis to screw on their labels there, and those, Arrow 2, Arrow 3, David Sling, and all that. They also had thought of the purely American, genesis, so to speak, already on the ground in Israel. It failed. It has a good radar. It cannot intercept missiles. And this is not the best what Houthis have. And can you imagine now they have to face Iran? And Iran, good Lord, it's completely different game. And we have been through this. The technological aspect is not there anymore. And maybe Colonel is correct. Probably in Trump's mind, he probably unloaded in his mind on Bibi, So, and that Israel will be doing the dynasty as they usually do, And so, we'll see. But there is nothing he's getting out of the deal. And the fact is, it doesn't matter what kind of treaties you sign. As Stalin astutely noted for delegation of Vatican in 1943, I believe, that they wanted to kind of involve Vatican in settlement of some kind of humanitarian issues and even political issues. Vatican being who they are, they want to stay, and so Pope can do this and can do that, which he could, and then Stalin asked them, how many divisions does Pope have? Simple as that. It is all about brute firepower. I mean, the amount of the fire impact you can unload or create for the enemy with the precision and sustainability. Russia has it. Simple as that.
Carl, your take on Donald Trump and the way that he's just somehow changing his rhetoric toward the conflict. Do you feel that he wants to leave the scene in Ukraine?
Which change do you want me to comment on? There have been about a dozen since he commissioned.
The way he's talking about Ukraine.
I feel sorry for Steve Woodcock. I really do. I mean, he had to have known from dealing with Trump in real estate business, he had to have known there were some wishy-washy things about Donald, if nothing else. But I feel sorry for him because he seems like he's an intent individual trying to learn and trying to listen. Most important thing in diplomacy, listening to the other side. But he's made no progress, and he's made no progress, in my view, because Trump won't let him make any progress. This business of what's happening in Southwest Asia, I think, is impacting Trump's thinking with regard to Ukraine too, but I don't know exactly how, because I think what the colonels, not the generals in the Pentagon are brain dead. I agree with Egg Seth. I wouldn't fire a few of them. I'd fire them all and start over again. But the colonels, there's some colonels in the Pentagon who know what they're talking about, and they've probably been going to Hegseth and saying very bluntly, we are doing nothing in the Red Sea in Prosperity Guardian, the operations title. We are doing nothing but burning up money and burning up weapon systems we might need in a bigger fray than with the Yemen. So I'm telling you, we need to get out of that. And then the conclusion by Trump and Hegseth probably too was, let's turn this over to Bibi. Bibi just conducted a massive raid. Let's just turn it over to him and say everything's copacetic with us, which is what I saw Trump saying, really, that we've accomplished our mission. Therefore, that's the old trick. We've accomplished the mission. Now we're through. You didn't accomplish the mission. You didn't even get close, but you're saying you did, and you're true because you got real deep strategic reasons to do so and physical reasons too. I just watched another webinar, seminar, whatever, peeked in on it, where economists were talking about the effort, perhaps because they've been talking about it within the administration, to revalue the U.S. gold supply and thus revalue gold globally. And I listened to the cooler heads who were in the room, and this is another idea that probably came out of Trump's cranium that's absolutely absurd. If I didn't, if I really thought Trump had a purpose, a deep-seated strategic purpose, I'd say it was to destroy the empire, but to make tons of money for him, his colleagues, and his family, most of all, while doing so. If you just look at Golden Dome and Elon Musk and SpaceX and others and their investments and his family's investments in these companies, you understand what I'm talking about, because Golden Dome is going to make Star Wars look like a farce in terms of expenditure of funds. And a lot of these funds are going in contracts to Elon Musk, SpaceX, and other companies in which his family is heavily invested. Read Donald Trump is heavily invested. So his ulterior motive seems to be to destroy this country. And I don't see anything happening in the range of questions you're asking about Ukraine, Gaza, or whatever that disputes that in any way, fashion, or form. And that's very worrisome. It's worrisome what he's doing on the domestic scene with regard to that too, because he's violating the Constitution. He's eliminating free speech on college campuses. He's trying to destroy those college campuses that want to cooperate with him. He's at the same time he just got Marjorie Taylor Greene up on her hind legs and helping to cancel, at least for the moment, the legislation he had going through the Congress that would have essentially made anybody who said their interpretation an anti-Semitic remark, put him in jail. That's a blatant violation of the Constitution. So he's orchestrating all these things at the same time. And I got to believe that it's not just the clowns that he's put in the administration. It's him too. So I don't know how to answer your questions anymore about geopolitics and geostrategic decisions and concerns, because he has no center to look at and no strategy and no policy to examine.
Yeah. Does Russia sees that way, Andrei?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. As I already stated, Russians are extremely well aware of their goings in Washington. All this talk, fluffy rhetoric about some kind of rapprochement and, nuclear superpowers are supposed to find some kind of the modus vivendi. And obviously, it's absolutely ridiculous not to have the at least communications channels on the level of the ambassadors, which is critical in always was, always will be. But I agree with Colonel. I mean, how can you evaluate this anymore? And yes, about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was one of the biggest supporters of Trump. She started pointing things out, which otherwise, you wouldn't have heard about during the campaign. And when you have your one major supporter into such a prolific figure, so to speak, in media and all that, so there's something wrong. And if he is indeed destroying the country, he is. It's just that's the whole problem with sociopaths. They do not understand, in a sense, the consequences, essentially, of what they are doing. So it is in very many respects similar to Nero playing liar, at least the legend tells us that, while Rome is burning. United States is not burning yet, but there's awfully close. And the question now is, this lady from MSNBC asks him, what is the red line? When are you going to go? Russians are keeping fingers crossed, say, just get the hell out of the way, go. So
that's definitely what I'd be saying if I were the Russians. I'd just say, get out of here, go. I'll settle this on my own.
Yeah,
because it's settled on the battlefield, and all Russia's going to do is gain more territory, whatever. And I don't see van der Linde and the Europeans they make me sick. They're, Merritt's finally solidified his coalition this morning, I think. But that's not going to last. It's not going to last because he does not represent the majority of Germans. He doesn't. And turning his B&D loose on the AfD, who represent more Germans than his coalition does, is a recipe for disaster. He just turned them loose on them to find out, just like Trump is doing here, find out those people who aren't loyal to Germany and get rid of them, put them in jail and so forth. This is disaster all over the West. And if I were Putin, I'd be elated in one sense, but in another sense, I'd be a little concerned because we still have almost 6,000 nuclear warheads. And look at the insanity that's behind those warheads.
Yeah. Andrei,
yeah.
The situation in Europe, I think, is of concern because of Ukraine. And do you see Europeans are talking about they're going to prepare for a war with Russia? And
yeah, sure.
How
in 50 years, maybe.
In their mind, they're going to attack Russia or Russia going to attack them?
Good question.
Yeah. Just to give you, and I actually entirely agree with Colonel, and I was on the record. The guys who do actual operational planning, not some general ideas, but the guys on the levels of the chiefs of staff, of the division, the guys who really deal with the larger operational and issues, and they know things because they can project the reality to larger strategic things. But here we have, I spoke about the story, my friends in Russia, who are close to line of combat. So they had this, they got one of many POW, Swedish Navy commander, which is the equivalent of lieutenant colonel. He was the chief of staff of not just one of the armed forces of Ukraine brigades, but the whole operational axis, if you wish. He was guarded by some Baltic states security detail, which was disposed of really fast. So he was really surprised that he was taking the POWs, and he had own credentials and all that. So, and when they started to interrogate him, and they started to recognize that the guy was thinking that the moment we move, the moment he draws the arrow on the map or on this pad, where you communicate with the battle management system and things like that, Russians supposed to run. You see, we attacked you. Why did you stay in place? And then, of course, you brought in the hell fire, and then just counterattack. That's how he got POWs. They literally think that you can draw the arrow, and that's the plan. That's how it's going to work, Obviously, it never works like this, and you have to have that is why it's called operational art, apart from being the operations themselves, which is a hard science. And so you look at this, these are people who, and when you talk about Europe, this is their level. Colonel Jacques Beau stated, they don't look at the movie, they look at the still picture, and they think that just by looking at the still picture, they can somehow figure it out. Europe has no resources to fight actual modern 21st century war. None. It doesn't have energy. It doesn't have the ability. Some people do not understand, but Russia produces more steel than Germany, France, United Kingdom doesn't produce it anymore practically, Italy and Spain put together. This is what people do not understand. They still think that you write some code and iPhones magically appear on the iPhone trees, you know? They don't understand the cars, the planes, the tanks, you know, the shells, you know, it all requires steel, it all requires iron, aluminum, titanium, and composite materials. But they don't look there. They look at the, whatever, the capitalization of the, you know, whatever the company they try to, you know, speculate on the stock market. And as the result, you see that, and then I have to say it, NATO weapons frankly suck. They have been paraded, and you saw yourself what is, let's face it, NATO air defense. As the Lieutenant General Semyonov, first deputy of the commander of the VKS, Airspace Forces of Russia, he stated, Patriot cannot defend itself. Forget it defending some other objects. And this is the Patriot PAC-3. The rest of it is just even worse. And as the result, we have this. And yeah, you remember Germans? Leopard 2A, whatever the hell, 5, whatever is the best tank in the world. Yeah, they all burned. Challenger was supposed the best tank in the world. You can see yourself. Marbleization of the metal, you know, marbleization of the armor. That tells you it's not just bad tank. It's quality of the materials which went into it is so bad that basically the core of the turret marbleizes during the fire. They say, oh no, we didn't use the German armor. Wouldn't matter. And there you go. And that's what has been basically demonstrated. And this is a shock to the system. They still cannot recover from it. So they panic and they create this, well, what they did always. At some point of time, it was anti-Soviet. The Soviets, who just lost 27 million people, wanted to attack Europe, you know. Oh, then, of course, Russia, now Russians. To do what?
Colonel, that's why the case of Patriot system, that's why Israel is sending another Patriot system to Ukraine. I think they don't.
You know, you haven't had anything really in the what I will call the Southwest Asia theater of operations, including the Levant, in that anything that lived up to promise, not a thing. To Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, now in part of Lockheed Martin, Grumman, any one of the major contractors' expectations. And it's to be expected in some respects because we haven't done anything with them for quite a while, really. A little bit of product improvement, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But we haven't been engaged in a conflict where combat, as it were, could test them. And they've been in that vogue with Israel in particular, but other places too, Ukraine, in a way that's been very disappointing for a lot of people in the military in particular. And not to mention the fact that when the Oreshnik missile hit Ukraine, the military shivered down to the bottom of its feet because it realized that while we had abrogated the INF treaty all on our own, single-handedly, really, just like all the other nuclear weapons treaties, while we had done that, we had not done squat after we did it. But the Russians had had a warm research and development bed in case we did that. And when they saw us do it, they activated that immediately. And so they produced and had produced missiles that took advantage of the INF treaty being abrogated. And those missiles are quite forbidding. I suspect, from what I'm hearing, a similar type hypersonic missile is what hit Ben Gurion Airport. And the Israelis are lying through their stinking teeth about all the failures that occurred that they've now fixed. And if the Houthis have any more of these missiles, Ben Gurion Airport is going to stay closed. And all these Israelis are going to stay dispersed across the world because Delta and American and all the rest of the airlines that service Jerusalem and Tel Aviv are not going to fly in there anymore. So, and the Europeans are far worse than we are, far worse, partly because of us. We had a little drill the other day where we sat down and looked at airplanes. We looked at artillery. We looked at helicopters. We looked at air defense systems. We looked at other components of still traditional hardware to a certain extent, but a component of the war in Ukraine and elsewhere. And we looked at what was on the drawing board and what was expected to come out, say, in the next 10 to 15 years, in Hegseth's view, you know, getting ahead of technology's obsolescence. And we said, for Europe, 20 years to become first-rate military power, and then you're not even talking about joint operations. You're not even talking about interoperability. Think about the Germans and the French operating together, the Swedes, the Finns, the Albanians, the Montenegrins, oh, that powerful country of Montenegro. They'll have to stop stealing automobiles in order to field the military. Think about all of those. Now, 2013, 2014, 2015, the Finns and the Swedes were observers on exercises of army size in Russia and reporting back to us through various and sundry outlets on what they observed. And what they observed was an almost comical inability to handle corps size and above maneuvers in the Russian army. This is 2012, 2013. But then the Russians did another set, and then another set, and then another set. So people who say that when we come to the special military operation, they couldn't have gone on to Kyiv and taken the country, they certainly could have. They just didn't activate everything that they had possible to activate, nor was that their intent. Now, I won't say that they perform miraculously well. No military does that's been put, you know, essentially out in the field practicing and not had any combat, but they perform pretty damn well, a lot better than Europeans would perform. And they don't have the interoperability problems. They don't have the communication problems. They don't have the, oh, you frogs go away problems. Oh, you krauts go away problem. Or, oh, you northern dudes go away problem. Or, oh, you Swedes go away problem. We had it. I know we had it in NATO, even at the peak of NATO's efficiency. Look back at the Balkans, if you will. Look back at how everybody backed away from the Balkans, except for Bill Clinton. God bless his soul. So we figured it would take at least 15 to 20 years, 3 to 5% of their GDP devoted every single one of those years. And then they still wouldn't have solved the problem of joint operations and interoperability. They'd have to do lots of exercises. Hopefully they'd be doing those. What's Russia going to be doing during this time? What are they going to be doing during this period when they see all of this happening? They're probably going to be taking everything they can get their hands on. I would be if I were they. And I would present it as a fait accompli to the Europeans. You keep going the way you're going, and I'm going to keep going the way I'm going. So we start an entire congregation on the European continent, Eurasian continent, probably. Where's China going to go in this? Where's India going to go in this if it gets out of a nuclear war with Pakistan and vice versa? I mean, we got a mess right now. And Donald Trump has absolutely zero knowledge nor inclination to help with this mess. Look who's helping with the Pakistan-India problem. A problem we jumped on in 2002 like crap on a goose. I mean, we jumped on that problem so fast. Secretary of State to Delhi, Deputy Secretary of State to Pakistan, telephone call from the president to the president of Pakistan, visits. What are we doing now? Nothing. Who's helping in that? China, India's arch enemy, and Russia. You know, this is crazy. The world is turning over. It's turning over, and Donald Trump has no idea that the world that's turning over is going to come down on his freaking head. But it's my country it's coming down on too, so I'm angry with him.
Well, strangely enough, it is mine too. You know, I have the freaking vested interest now in, we live here for 30 plus years, and seeing the country and what happened to it in the last 30 plus years is just absolutely mind-boggling. And I survived, let's put it this way, the collapse of the Soviet Union. I've been there when it was happening. I actually was at the center of it when the whole Caucasus basically went up in smoke. And what we went through. And then, you know, you come to this almost resort. You know, you come in and you feel this feeling of safety, the feeling of calmness. And then guess what we have now? And this is just insane. And then, and I thought that, well, it was a huge event, Soviet collapse, but it is even the Soviet collapse pales in comparison to what we're observing now historically, the tectonic shift. It's already happened, essentially. We are what I constantly say, arrangement phase. and many people do not understand because we are short-lived, species. What, 85, 90, and then we, it's in the best case scenario. And it's nothing in terms of history, but many people say, oh yeah, what's happening in the next year? Guys, it's not a year. We're talking about the decades of the complete rearrangement of the world. And hopefully we are smart enough and responsible enough to stay away from any kind of the escalation. But yes, I agree with Colonel also. Trump, he has no clue what is happening. He doesn't. He doesn't have the toolkit. People say that he's very smart and has a good memory, which could be the case. I'm not arguing about that, but he might be able to, memorize a lot of minutia. But he doesn't have systemic education and systemic knowledge and systemic experience other than playing golf and doing the deals with the, whatever, real estate and providing those casinos, what have you, and judging what is called the Miss Universe contests. Certainly requires a very interesting set of skills, so to speak, But when you look attentively, does he have a statesman toolkit? I don't see any. And the fact is, as I'm on the record, for all situation with the neocons, all situation with all kinds of other issues, the last American statesman was George Bush Sr. Period. He had a monster of the Secretary of the State, He had a Colin Powell, obviously, And he had a lot of people who had brains, okay, with the exception of Dick Cheney, obviously. But I mean, it's after that, what do we have? We have politicians. Essentially, the only skill they have is how to get elected and stay elected, period. You see, that's the problem. What happened now, getting elected became the prime reason for declaring triumph, while in reality, it's just the first step in realization of oneself as the statesman, doing good for your own country and doing good for the world while doing this. But what we have the good old and actually, frankly, clownish imperialist. That's who Trump is. And in this case, as I already stated, and I wrote today even on my blog, he is a more coherent version of Biden, essentially. That's what we have.
Nima, I gotta respond to the Dick Cheney comment. H.W. Bush was the last president in the post-World War II era that had any brains. Dick Cheney had adult supervision. He had H.W. over him, Colin Powell under him, Jim Baker on his flank, and the president to wrap him up. So he couldn't get out of that clay.
Yeah, he was entrapped. He was controlled. And right. You couldn't go against Jim Baker.
I completely agree with Andrei that we're watching really a similar period in the Western Roman Empire, as he suggested, that ran from Tiberius to Caligula to Claudius on down to Nero. And we're watching Trump acting as if he were Caligula and Nero in combination. Yeah. And it's a dangerous period for the world. And I don't second guess Andrei at all in terms of the concern that Russia and Beijing and Delhi and other capitals in the world have for what the United States has become. I was listening to Medea Benjamin on Judge Napolitano's show just before we came on here. And I was struck by a couple of things she said, particularly about the Israeli drones that struck the ship Conscience in the Mediterranean or in Port Malta. But anyway, it's in Malta right now. And it's got a hole in its bow. And the Maltese apparently are not going to allow repair. They wouldn't allow repairs unless they brought it into port. And I think that's probably a cover story for not allowing it out again, because the last ship was in Turkey and the foodstuffs and all the humanitarian aid on it actually rotted in the sun because the Turks would not give them permission to depart port. And that's probably going to happen again. This is a big ship with a lot of supplies on it. And when Medea talked about it, she talked about it in a way that makes the United States as complicit as Israel, if not more so. And that alone is a complete departure from what Andrei was talking about. H.W. Bush cracked down on the Israelis big time after the first Iraq war because he felt like he'd gained some leverage over them. He forced them into the Oslo Accord negotiations that went on, but nonetheless kept them from killing each other. And they beat him. They beat him when he ran for a second term. I know they beat him because I watched how Bill Clinton kowtowed to the AIPAC group, the Jewish lobby, Israeli lobby, and how Bush wouldn't do it, how he simply would not do it. And, you know, he got beaten, and he got beaten partly because of the Israeli lobby. So we're looking at a period in American history that must scare the devil out of the rest of the world. That portion that really knows the other great powers and some others that are near great powers like Brazil, Japan, certainly, they know, and they're worried sick because they do not see any direction to what we're doing other than downward. And that's a real concern of a lot of us who still care about this country.
Andrei, before wrapping up this session, I want to talk about the Victory Day. We know that Xi Jinping is in Russia, and the pictures that you're seeing, that you see they're hugging each other. And can you imagine Donald Trump in a similar picture like this?
No. It's let's face it. This is indeed the hug of their good old friends. Xi and Putin, they are friends. They're not just statesmen. For those people who do not understand the Russian-Chinese relations and the strategy behind it, and of course there are many neocons, especially all kinds of the so-called Russian experts who talk about that Russia being junior partner. They have to keep in mind, which is of course complete garbage, but Russia now is a Chinese shield. It's a shield for China because Russia tied in all Western resources, which otherwise, starting from Obama actually, who was obsessed already by shifting to the into the Chinese direction, and all the shift to the Asia. And the problem with them, of course, from Obama and others after him, was that they don't understand the first thing about Russia and what real economy and real war is. And so they thought the plan was, let's defeat Russia fast, split it, get hands on resources, and then we will, strangle China. Well, didn't work out this way, huh? So, and now you have the premier military power and the largest by far. It's monstrous productive economy in the world. Russia, by the way, is no joke either. It's the fourth economy in the world, real economy. So just to demonstrate, many people still do not understand. Russia produces more iron and steel than the United States. China produces 12 times more steel than the United States.
And China bought 90.4% of its oil from Russia last year.
Yeah. And many people don't understand. China produces 3.5 times more automobiles than the United States. That's the only thing where China really lags, and it's the huge issue, obviously, in militarily, is the submarines. United States still has the world-class, for all problems, world-class submarine force, but it's, and China obviously have issues, huge issues with the commercial aviation and aviation in general, because they have issues with designing the proper engines, jet engines. Obviously, United States and its GE, state of the art, and Pratt & Whitney, so now they have PD-14s and PD-8s already in serial production and things like that on Russian side. So you have these two guys who are militarily, economically, it's not just two superpowers. They are hyperpower put together. And what many people do not understand, the integration militarily is ongoing, despite the fact that, of course, there is no formal military treaty between Russia and China. But the fact when Putin dropped this bombshell about 7 years ago, when he stated, oh yeah, it's not a secret, but we are the guys who are helping China to build the early warning system of the missile attack. These are technologies which are beyond, and now you have to think what the hell is going on in terms of resources and how it's rearranged. Well, Russia and China are responsible for the security of this gigantic Eurasian economic space, which is beginning to shift their leadership in technology, knowledge. Militarily, it's already there, and economically, the sheer size is insane.
Yeah. Let me add one other ingredient here, which really troubles me, because I was a student at the Naval War College and wrote my what would have been a master's thesis on attack submarines in direct support of the carrier battle group. So I know a little bit about what I speak. We're destroying, Andrei, that area of excellence. We have submarines, both attack and ballistic, that are nearing their life cycle. We are probably going to have to extend them, dangerously extend their life cycles, because both the programs, the Virginia class and the Columbia class, are over cost and beyond. Yeah, it's a mess. It's a tragedy. Yeah.
It is strange from the country, which of course excelled up to including a higher class into the state-of-the-art, excellent strategic missile submarines. And then suddenly, but the giveaway was not even the fact that there are cost overruns and all other things and issues with what is called those inserts into the shafts for the ballistic missile. It's when I read that, and you read and it's like, oh, it's going to carry Columbia class, which is still not there. They hope to float the first hull by 28. And objectively speaking, United States is in need, of the substitution and change and updating of its naval nuclear deterrent. There's nothing wrong with that per se. Any country would do that. Russians did it. But you read this and then you look at the missile which it will carry by 2030. Trident 2D5, by that time it will be 40-year-old missile. That means they don't even have new missile which you have to put into the new allegedly state-of-the-art submarine. Eventually they probably will build it, but it's already cost overruns and it's horrendous. I mean, it's just a mess.
Hegseth is right about we're not able to produce something before the technology is obsolete.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Carl and Andrei, being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
My pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Take care.
Bye-bye.